Professor Chomsky, how do you see the future of Balkans? And do you see any difference between approach of this administration and the previous one, and how that would play in the geostrategic view of the creating of new Europe, as somebody said in the administration without naming names?
I think that this administration is pursuing roughly the same policies as the preceding one. You know, circumstances change, so policies change. They basically just want to keep the Balkans quiet, don't bother us. As long as the Balkans are quiet, not bothering us, integrating themselves into the US-dominated system, then it's fine, do whatever you like. In fact, we now have interesting information from the highest level of the Clinton administration. Strobe Talbot, who was one of the top planners in the Strobe Talbot, who was the head of the state Pentagon Joint Planning Group at the time of the Kosovo War. He was deputy in the State Department. He was designated to be in charge of the Joint State Military Commission that dealt with negotiations during the Kosovo War. He just wrote the introduction to an interesting book by his I think, subordinate who was in charge of communications, John Norris. And in the book, in the introduction, Strobe Talbot says, this is the book you should read if you want to know how we in the Clinton administration understood the bombing of Serbia at the highest level. Says this is the authoritative account. All right, take a look at the book, and you find that Norris says, can't quote the exact words, but something like this. He said that the fundamental reason for the bombing of Serbia in 1999 was not concern, not humanitarian concern for the plight of Kosovar Albanians. It was because Serbia had not undertaken the appropriate social and economic reforms, meaning it was the one holdout in the region that had not accepted the sort of Washington consensus type programs. Well, you know, part of that was already obvious. I mean, if there's massive evidence from the State Department, NATO, OSCE, and others, which shows the British parliamentary inquiry, which shows just overwhelmingly that concern over the humanitarian concern was lacking. They knew perfectly well. There was a ugly level of atrocities, pretty low level, kind of shared between the government and the guerrillas. Maybe actually the British government thought it was mostly guerrillas. But they understood that when they were undertaking the bombing, that was going to escalate the atrocities sharply. In fact, that's even clear from the Milosevic indictment made during the bombing. If you take a look at the indictment, it refers with a single exception to crimes committed after the bombing. Yeah, that's consistent with what was reported in great detail by the OSCE and the State Department and others. So it was clear all along that a humanitarian concern could have been, at most, very marginal. But it's interesting to hear a confirmation from the highest level of the Clinton administration, not only that that's true, but that the real reason was unwillingness to accept the social and economic reforms, as they're called, roughly neoliberal programs. So, and I think that was the policy of the Clinton administration, not only there but elsewhere, and it continues to be the policy of the Bush administration. I mean, there are new issues coming up, like what to do about Kosovo, for example. It's a new issue. Well, you know, I can tell you my own opinion, but I don't know what their planning is. They haven't said. But I think a not unreasonable answer is one that was proposed by the president of Serbia in I think 1993, Kosic, I think his name was. He proposed, and I think that's probably what's going to happen ultimately, that Kosovo should be partitioned with the mostly, at that time, mostly Serbian part. Most of the Serbs have been driven out, but at that time, mostly Serbian part assimilated to Serbia, and the mostly Albanian part either independent if they want or probably assimilated to Albania. My guess is that sooner or later his proposal from 1993 is or some version of it is what's going to be implemented. But I haven't seen any policy statement from the Bush administration on this.
Mr.